Welcome to another episode of the Unleashing the Future of Work A Guy podcast, live online podcast. And today I am joined by an awesome friend and guest who is incredibly active on LinkedIn and someone who we're going to be talking with about product design, diversity, equity, and inclusion today. Sabrina Meherali is a D&I leader with 10 years of experience in HR, D&I, and UX, who is passionate about business, people, and product. And she leverages her skills to really think about how do we design more inclusive products that can change the world, not just our local communities. And without further ado, I would love to bring Sabrina on live, on air today. And, before Sabrina and I get into the chit chat of what we're going to talk about, if you're tuning in right now, please let me know where you're tuning in from so we can show you some love. We know we usually have people tuning in from Nigeria, Australia, the UK. Let us know in the comments and we'll show you some love. Sabrina, welcome, man.
Thanks, Jim. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, really good. It's Saturday.
Yeah, how have you been hanging in there, due to COVID-19?
Yeah. I've been hanging in. I've been hanging in. Yeah. It's been good. It's been all right. I'm fortunate to be able to work from home and So, how about you?
That's awesome. I'm doing well today. I have been taking it easy on this lovely Saturday. Shout out to Raquel, who is viewing in from Charlotte, and Mr. Hood, I love your content on LinkedIn, who is viewing in from Southfield, Mississippi, I believe. So, Sabrina, I would love for you to share a little bit more about yourself and, how did you get into the work that you do as a diversity and inclusion leader, but more importantly, how you kind of converge it with the world of UX and product design?
Yeah. So typically, I believe that like D&I in itself is often thought of as an HR piece or a side piece in an organization. And I think for as long as I can remember, I've always been super passionate about social inclusion. And I was a person who experienced exclusion as a child for over 10 years, being bullied and really started to understand what it felt like to be on the outside for no fault of my own. And so I became really passionate about being that voice for equity and inclusion of people who were also on the margins and others who needed somebody else to kind of stand up for them and bring that voice to life. So that's why I got into this space. And with my background, having been in HR for quite some time, eventually I pivoted and I started working in UX and as a product manager for a period of time. And I started to notice that it's interesting because the way that we think about equity and inclusion when we talk about the workplace isn't the same way that we talk about equity and inclusion when we're creating solutions for our world. And so I thought, well, that's interesting because everybody needs to use a phone, a computer, a cup, everybody needs these types of things. And why is it that we're not thinking about access and inclusion of all people when it comes to the solutions that we're putting out into the world? Why are we only thinking about diversity and inclusion as a subject when we're talking about the workplace and our employees? So that's why I developed a deeper interest in the product inclusion side and tried to bring that inclusion and diversity voice into the product design world.
Wow, that's amazing. Shout out to Darren, who has just corrected me, and he told me that he's tuning in from Michigan. Darren, thank you for the correction. Shout out to All In, who's tuning in as well. Hi, how are you doing, All In? Shout out to Michael, who's tuning in from Portland, and Boma, who's tuning in from Lagos, Nigeria. Boma, shout out to you. I'm a Niger man myself, so shout out to you. So, Sabrina, I think it's what's powerful is, how you've taken your past experience and growing up, experiencing bullying, and you realize that there's huge opportunity in the product world, especially in the business world, to build more inclusive products. I would love for you to share, when you realized when you were younger that, this might be a path that you want in a career.
Sorry, you kind of cut out there. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at what moment did you realize there's a bigger opportunity to start, seeing how can you help companies build more inclusive products?
Yeah. So I think that was when I was working on a particular project where I was developing a loan to help tackle the payday lending industry.
Wow.
And so I realized when I was working in that space that I was talking to people who struggled with digital access and digital literacy. I was talking to people who were through no fault of their own credit challenged and experienced barriers in our world. And so I'm lucky I work for a financial cooperative that's very values based, and so brings a lot of that ethics into the work. But it's not so common that you come across financial institutions that are thinking about equity and access, like financial inclusion for people who maybe are credit challenged, or people who are strapped and unable to pay for an emergency, or people who don't have access to the internet to do like online banking or mobile banking. And so these are the types of conversations that we were having as a team, and really got me really interested in the fact that this is a gap. A lot of organizations don't think this way, don't think about access and inclusion, and so that's kind of what kickstarted it for me.
So when you were working on this project and it was kind of like driving your curiosity, who was someone that you maybe were looking at in the industry that was already doing this work that you were kind of taking inspiration from?
Well, we did a lot of research when it came to like fintech space. I know there's a lot of fintechs that are that are smaller and a bit more innovative when it comes to financial services and looking at populations differently, looking at the diversity of populations. But when we're looking at financial institutions, the big five, it wasn't so common to see this type of ingenuity and ethics really at play. So it was kind of like breaking out of the mold of looking at what other financial institutions were doing and looking at what the tech industry was doing, really.
So talk to me about, because I think right now more than ever, we need people like you who are working on products that, one, shine light on how diverse and, more importantly, different everyone is when it comes to their needs, their wants, and more importantly, their context, right? For you, what are some products outside of the projects that you've worked on that, you believe are like test case examples of thinking from an inclusive standpoint first?
Yeah, so I've been looking a lot at Google's products, and really what inspires me about Google is that I think they recognize through previous products that they were they were probably not designed as thoughtfully as could be when it came to including people from different racialized backgrounds, for example. So I'll give you an example of that, and then also something as material and concrete as like a spoon, which is, I think, really interesting, and it makes you question everything. So with Google, there was with Google Images, they had launched Google Images to be able to categorize individuals' pictures in a particular way based on what the algorithm would read of the faces. And because the product itself wasn't tested on people from different racial backgrounds, they categorized this photo of two Black individuals as gorillas.
Wow.
Incredibly offensive and probably not what they intended to do, but it's the unintended consequences of not thinking about testing products on a diverse population of people. And so not including them even perhaps in the design. So that's an example of, what I've seen Google do as of more recently is really take that stance to be more thoughtful about the way they leverage their employee resource groups to actually be part of the design as well, which I think is amazing. And then when I was talking about the spoon, so, when the spoon was originally designed, you have to kind of wonder who was it tested on, who were the spoon was tested tested on. Probably they were able-bodied, probably they were middle-aged, they weren't children, probably weren't people with motor skill challenges, or the inability to, maybe even seniors who might struggle with holding something straight. And I saw my aging grandfather who had like low vision, just couldn't use a spoon, right? Everything was falling off of it. And then I just saw recently that there was this new iteration of the spoon where it has a self-leveling aspect to it. So when you hold the spoon, it doesn't tip over when you're holding it, trying to feed yourself. It's something like that, and looking at how a product like the spoon could actually be redesigned, re-engineered to be more inclusive and work for people who are children, seniors, folks with different physical challenges, and so something as simple as that, which inspires me to look at the way that we design our world differently.
That's so powerful. I think you talking about, what Google is doing and how they had this really huge initiative. And when I was working with Google, that I noticed it was called their 1 billion user initiatives, right? To further kind of reach a billion users using their products across the world. They really went local and dove deep on some of the customers in India, in Nigeria, and how they were using, Google software, from maps to travel and all of that. And I think initiatives like that really high tech companies are doing, that's how you really, when you go to that local level and paint a deep picture at the local maxima on what is the context of how people are using our products, what are they learning, how can we inform these learnings to build something that even scales further, right? I think that's when you really start creating a better product, and I think even leading in your category.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So let me ask you, for anyone that's looking to maybe get into product inclusion and product design, because you have this very layered background where you've done HR, you've done UX, and you do product. What are 2 to 3 things you encourage them to start looking into if they want to kind of pursue that career path? And before you answer that, I want to show love to Darren, who's saying, whoa. So he's loving some of the comments that you're mentioning. AM is saying financial inclusion matters in a well-being world. Shout out to you, AM. James is saying, James from Madrid, shouting out and saying a big hello. James, thank you so much for making time and watching this podcast live. I also want to show love to, let me see here. Okay, y'all, my LinkedIn is messing up. So sometimes I'm having trouble seeing some of you all. I also want to say shout out to Ty, who is viewing and tuning in from Vegas. Thank you so much. And shout out to Hafiz, who is tuning in from Clarksville, Tennessee. And Megan, as always, tuning in from Memphis. I appreciate you, Megan. So yeah, Sabrina, what are 2 to 3 things that you encourage people to maybe look into if they want to pursue a career in product design and product inclusion?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say when looking in any sort of area of inclusion, whether it's I see diversity, inclusion, equity to be really a holistic field. It touches on every aspect of business, and if anybody wants to kind of move into that space, or which I believe everybody should be bringing that lens into their work, it's to really start to be curious. And to exercise a level of curiosity, humility, and empathy. Really taking the time to reflect on your own identity is one. That's something that I'm in constant process of doing, is like, who am I in this world? What layers do I have to my identity? I'm a woman. I'm a woman of color. I'm also an Asian woman, which means that I have privilege relative to Indigenous or Black women, which means I'm able-bodied. I'm, all of these other aspects to who I am, and where I stand in society, and then getting curious about the identities that I don't hold, and how might other folks be experiencing the world differently from me. And I think that constant reflection and curiosity, and like really going on to Google, like searching and reading about it. I've been doing a lot of research when it comes to the pandemic, right, where we're in right now, and trying to understand what I'm experiencing is not at all what other folks are experiencing. So how can I develop a deeper understanding towards that? And I think when you have that understanding and that curiosity and a genuine care to really create inclusion and equity in our world, that drives innovation, that drives you to think about things differently and challenge yourself to think about how do we start to bring in more folks into these experiences that I, as a privileged individual, have access to.
Man, that's powerful. That's so powerful. And sometimes people forget to recognize their privilege, right? Even me as a black male, I often tell people I'm privileged because I'm a male, right? Even though I am a person of color, in that sense, I'm not privileged. But as a male, you are like I'm privileged, right? I'm fortunate enough to work in high tech. I'm fortunate enough to have parents. Like there's all kinds of different ways that we're privileged beyond just our gender and our even our profession. And I think some people don't even realize that. And I think it also comes back, recognizing your privilege is also understanding why you need to be grateful too, right? Like some people don't have their parents, which prevents them from even being as successful as others. Some people don't have financial security, right? So like we're privileged in all a variety of different ways, and sometimes people just forget that.
And I think it's so important that to recognize that we're a blend of of privilege and marginality, in the sense that I often hear the diversity conversation being focused in terms of gender and race as the primary pieces, and those are very important pieces to focus on. But then there's also aspects of ability. There's members of the LGBTQ. There's language. There's newcomers. There's a whole bunch of different pieces, right? That I think we need to look at this holistically and see, okay, these are the areas where there's digital access. And like the fact that you and I are having this conversation right now through technology, and others are able to tune in and listen, it's a privilege.
It's a privilege.
There's many other individuals who can't access knowledge and information in the same way that we can so easily. So it's that constant like checking yourself, who is in the room and who can't get into the room. And who's trying but can't, and who would like to but can't. And if we're reflecting on that often in our lives, I think it opens up a lot more opportunities for us to create with others in mind.
Yeah, man, that's so powerful. So shout out to James. Love this empathy and care. Thank you so much, James. Megan is saying, curious about identities I don't hold. I love that. Megan is loving what you're saying. Megan is also saying greetings from Memphis, and Edward is saying greetings from Canada. So he's tuning in with you right from the Canada. Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. And Pranav is saying great initiative, Sabrina. He's showing you more inspiration and love as well. So Sabrina, let me ask you, where do you see kind of the product inclusion movement going? Because I think in the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen a movement around companies and people thinking more from an equity-based lens. And one of the things I'm really, excited about what we're building with Guide is that we think about Guide as a product from a standpoint of how are we making it accessible, but more importantly, how are we making education accessible? How are we making learning accessible, not only, within the workforce, but for people in low-income areas. And, that's really core to kind of like our origin story, and as well as our social impact. And I want to ask you, because from what I've seen in terms of the product inclusion movement, I think we're moving towards a more equitable world, right? The trends are showing that, by 2025, a majority of people in the U.S. are going to be multicultural, right? And they're going to have more purchasing power than, other ethnicities. So where do you see the kind of this movement going?
Yeah, so I see a big evolution in terms of the way that organizations need to think about diversity and inclusion as a whole. I think that that's going to have to change when it comes to like the future of work, the future of business, the future of society, the future of education. All of it is really demanding that change of lens in the way that we view equity and inclusion as sort of a side piece, like this little topic that we talk about when it's nice to talk about. It's really not going to work that way. If we think about the fact that we are experiencing like globalization, a lot of people are coming from everywhere and living everywhere all over the world. We're going to be experiencing, a demand for talent when it comes to the workplace, and understanding how are we going to be able to tap into that talent? How are we going to be able to find them? Is it going to be people? That's where the whole concept of remote work comes in, and geographical diversity, right? Being able to get people from different parts of the world. But if you're going to be able to do that, then you're going to have to be able to work with people from different parts of the world. You're also going to have to produce things that work for people across the world. And it's not just geographical diversity, there's ability. I mean, I just posted recently a study that something that said that about 83% of disabilities are acquired in life. 83%.
Wow.
Right. And so, we often think about disability, and I think that's the bias that we have, is that it's people who are born with it, but really it's not. And the chances of you and I or other people developing a disability in our lifetime is pretty high. So how are we thinking about inclusion of folks that, that could be us in the future? And then also others who may not be us, but it's important for us to reflect on that when we think about where we're headed in the future. So yeah.
I think it's this type of thinking that a lot of corporations need more of, right? Because it's broad. It's you really thinking from a broad sense. It's broad-based thinking, but understanding, okay, how can we make it applicable to that customer or that user who's living in Memphis, Tennessee, right, or Idaho, and wants more access, right? Wants to feel as if they have a sense of affinity with that brand, but because it speaks to who they are, their identity, and more importantly, where they're maybe not too capable, but where they also want to like be recognized, right? And I feel as if when I think about product design, I think about accessibility and really this movement around inclusive product design, it goes back to user experience for me. As someone that was trained as a designer, is do you have empathy for the customer and their way of life?
Exactly. Yeah. Again, it starts with that, right? It starts with the curiosity and starts with the empathy of individuals. And I think part of the way we can get that in understanding is by reflecting on ourselves. And the other part is we just got to bring the people in. You got to, right? We won't know everything. We can't possibly know and understand the lived experiences of every person in this planet. That's why we got to bring them in and include them for the value that they bring with their own identities. So so I think that and we will start seeing that, I think, through the push that's happening with the future of work and how we're starting to see an emergence of people coming from everywhere. And so it's just about now what I'm curious about is like, how do we start to make sure that we create environments where these individuals can all be leveraged to their potential and add value, and how are we continually checking our biases as we're at work and we're designing, we're creating.
I love that, and co-creating too, right? So Sabrina, let me ask you, because I want to show love to our customers now. To our viewers, not customers. So Megan is saying, Darren, great question. Darren's question is, would love to hear your thoughts about dealing with ageism in the UX world. Talk to us about that, Sabrina.
Yeah. So I think, I think that I think ageism is the same way that I would look at every other aspect of diversity, right? We all are from different demographic backgrounds, different ages. And so again, like being able to include people with different ages into our user research, into our process for even participation, right? As employees, it's so important to have that mix. People who are young and people who are old are going to be our customers if we want to design a product that works for everybody. So being able to include those individuals into the way that we design, I think, is really important. And I really believe, though, that and I was doing some research around product inclusion, really understanding how we create our personas. Oftentimes, when we create personas, that we use demographic data and say, this person is this, and what sometimes that can do is it can actually reinforce stereotypes.
It's true.
So it can be like, the person who is perhaps not fluent with using a computer and has trouble with, accessing certain platforms or things like that. We might say that person is somebody who's in their 70s and, doesn't like, so we'd classify them in a particular way. And instead, what the challenge is to try and actually use alternative conflicting demographic data that would challenge a stereotype. So what if this is actually a young mom of two? And, it really causes us to think about things differently and challenge our own biases and our own stereotypes that we have so deeply ingrained in ourselves, and not really just categorize people in accordance to the stereotypes.
You I love that because one of the practices that that we're creating within Guide, and something that I'm so adamant about, is that what really matters more so when you're thinking about user profiles and user experience. And this is you and I are both, we love design. It's really understanding what are the attitudes and behaviors. So one of the things that we do within Guide, we don't even have, I don't even in some of our the pitch that we're giving to investors, and even in just how we characterize our customer, it's really, though they're a creator, but their attitudes and their behaviors is that they want to create content, right? Like, are you categorizing not the age, because demographics don't actually give you a sense of what are their motivations, what are their needs, what's their belief systems. So like there's this movement now that, and I love that you mentioned this, that you have to think of as a product designer is, are you thinking about the customer from an aspect of what does their day-to-day look like? What are their attitudes? What are their motivations? What wakes them up? And more importantly, what's their why, in the sense, right? Like, why do they want to use your product? And think about it from a fundamental needs-based perspective. And that's like another tier of product design that, early career product designers don't often realize.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's, what's the real intention? What are we really trying to understand? Which is like the goals, their motivations, their challenges, and not necessarily the way that we classify them according to, most of the time, societal stereotypes. So I think it's, either we don't include that at all, or we challenge ourselves to put an alternative demographic data onto somebody that we would stereotype in a particular way.
So there says, good stuff. I should have been more specific, though. I'm thinking about ageism regarding UX professionals, practitioners who are experiencing discrimination when trying to find opportunities.
So can you repeat the original question?
So, what are your thoughts on ageism in regards to UX professionals and practitioners who are experiencing discrimination when they're, looking for roles?
That's a difficult one. I would say, in short, I would say that it's that's really unfortunate. We shouldn't be looking, and there's so much value, again, in having people who have who represent different ages in the design, because of course we're designing for a diverse community of people with different ages. And so I think that, this is so common. It's so common to hear that there are folks that are discriminated because of age, gender, race, ability, sexuality, all of the above, and that's really what the fight is for here in diversity and inclusion, when it comes to in organizations recognizing the value that people bring through their lived experiences in terms of age and otherwise. And so, it's not really a short answer to be able to say, what my thoughts are in terms of that, because it's so common and it's really unfortunate. But I think it's just being able to work with companies to continue to emphasize the value that these individuals bring. Not only, I believe that there should be a moral argument for equity and inclusion as the first, right? I don't want to always go to the business case, because I think that it kind of feels wrong for me to just push a business case on something that's a matter of morality. But apart from that, I think that, organizations do need to see that if they want a product that works for everybody, if they want a workplace that works for everybody, we need to be thinking about including everybody into that design.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Darren, that's a powerful question. Darren's a huge advocate of really thinking of what I from Darren's content, because I follow his work. It's pretty awesome. He hates ageism in the workplace. He hates it. He's always an advocate against it, right? So I love that Darren asked that question, and Sabrina, great answer. I want to ask you, Sabrina, with and Darren says, well said, by the way. So good stuff. Megan is saying, James, agree with hardware and connectivity from governments, but I like to see it for households and controls to all member benefits. Interesting. Shout out to Megan and James, who are talking in the comments. I want to ask you, Sabrina, what are some products out there that you just love how they've been built because you think it's coming from an inclusive angle?
Oh gosh.
Tell us all.
You've been put me on the spot. I have to think about that, actually. I don't. I don't actually know right off the top of my head of something, because I haven't done enough of an analysis to see like for everybody. I will say though that like voice technology is improving the lives of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think that, I've been reading, and this is why I said I don't want to say this, because I know that voice technology perhaps hasn't been tested on people with all different types of accents or people from different racial backgrounds. And so I don't know how, how inclusively designed they are, but I do know that the intention around voice technology, and when it first started, from my understanding, is that it was actually designed to help folks who couldn't type or who needed that ability to speak into a device. So around an accessibility kind of lens. But now it's used for everybody, right? Even if you look at like subtitles and how subtitles are used to support such a mass range of people who originally perhaps designed for people who can't hear, individuals who are deaf. But now you look at like people who are working from home and have noisy children running in the background, and they can't, they might not be able to have their sound on, but they can still follow the conversation and look at subtitles. And so I think like simple technology, simple solutions like that, you think about how widely used they are now. I think that's an example. Also, like the button on the door, the head, an elevator, things like that. Lots of people are using it. It's not only for people who have accessibility challenges. And I think that's the way we need to think about product design and inclusive design, is that oftentimes people think that it needs to be designed for a small group of people off to the side. It's like, oh, this is everybody. This is a majority of people. It'll work for them, but we need to think about this really small group here and design for them. And it feels laborious, and it feels like an exhaustion of our resources. And but I think that's the wrong way to look at design. And I think really it's saying, if we have that mentality, it feels like it's an added piece of work. But sometimes if you design for the most marginalized individual, it ends up working for everyone.
It ends up scaling. Wow, that's powerful. That's a powerful concept. I hope someone is taking notes on that. And shout out to Taban, who is loving what you're mentioning. He just loves your work and he loves your thoughts. So shout out to my co-founder, Taban at Guide. Megan is saying morality beyond religion to allow diversity of religion and non-religious. I like it, Sabrina. I like it. So she loves that. Shout out to Megan, who is a frequent viewer and one of our number one fans. Megan, thank you so much for your awesome comments. With that said, Sabrina, where can the people follow more of your work?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm happy to connect by LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on here. So there's that. And I'm also launching a podcast next week. So so feel free to follow. It's called More Than a Minority.
Wow, that's powerful. So make sure you check out More Than a Minority. Sabrina is going to definitely share the link in the comments after this episode. And more importantly, they can connect with you on LinkedIn, right? You're pretty active on there. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I love chatting about the subject. So happy to chat with anybody who wants to.
Awesome. Make sure you connect with Sabrina on LinkedIn. And with that said, if you are interested in being a guest or a sponsor of the Unleashing the Future of Work live online A Guide podcast, make sure you check out our website, UTFOW.com. UTFOW.com. And with that said, Sabrina, I want to thank you so much for finding time to be on today's episode of Unleashing the Future of Work, a Guide podcast, and sharing your lovely wisdom with our Guide community. I want to ask you, Sabrina, what is the parting message that you want to leave our amazing community with?
That I would say that we all can do something. That oftentimes some of these challenges seem so daunting and seem so beyond us. But as each individual, we have so much power within our voices, and we have power within our lived experiences. And I believe that we need to operate from the place that we can change. We can change the world. We can change our systems. So keep pushing, keep on challenging things, and the world will change.
Man, you are an inspiration, Sabrina. Thank you so much for sharing that with our amazing community. Thank you so much. With that said, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to be on the lookout for the next episode tomorrow. I'm going to have an amazing special guest with me. And I want to say this and say peace, love, and talk to you soon, y'all.
Thank you.